Thank you very much for your kind introduction, Yuka, and I'm very happy to have this opportunity to present at the PhD seminar where I'm, for the first time in all the years that we've had the PhD seminar, not in Oslo as I am on sabbatical. But I'm very glad to have this possibility to give one presentation and to have some discussions with you. So I was given the rather challenging title on reflecting on the future of legal and interdisciplinary research for sustainability, which is both challenging and very inspiring for me because it resonates so much with the work that we are doing in the sustainability law research group and the research that I'm doing personally as well. So I will start by setting out some key takeaways of my presentation. The first one is that sustainability is complex, it's interconnected, and I would even say messy. So although many would prefer that it could be decomplexified and simplified down to a single metric so that we easily could measure, for example, for businesses if they are contributing to sustainability, that is not possible. And any attempts at doing that actually just risks undermining the work towards sustainability. And then something that might come as a bit of a surprise, but I would state this very strongly, and nevertheless, is that the idea of objective research is a myth, and it's in many ways a dangerous myth because it has also given many of us this feeling that if we have opinions on what we are doing research on, if we want to suggest changes, then we are somehow moving outside of the academic zone and becoming an activist or political or even communist. I mean, there's no limit to what kind of labels that can be put on a scholar that goes a little bit outside of the established idea of how a scholar should act. But I would say that all research contains subjective elements, and the key is being open about where we are coming from and what we're aiming to do with our research, because it's those that think that they are doing some kind of value neutral research that actually without reflecting on it, are just perpetuating the values of predecessors. And I would also say that whatever level on research we are on, that we can all contribute to research for sustainability. And legal research for sustainability is by definition interdisciplinary because it has to draw on other disciplines, on sciences, to be able to assess whether it actually is a contribution to sustainability. And sustainability is the grand challenge of our time. We are now in this decisive decade of action towards the SDGs, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which set out a really wonderful overarching objective of peaceful, just and inclusive societies and the lasting protection of the planet and its natural resources. But as you've probably already heard about during this week, it's not something that we in our research group see as a good analytical framework for our research on sustainability law, because it's a linear list of goals that is partly partly counterproductive and inconsistent. So nor do we say, in spite of the summer we have behind us where climate change really became very high up on the agenda, it's so clear that climate change is not just a future threat, it is also a situation that we are living with now. It's been called a code red for humanity, but we cannot just work on finding ways to mitigate climate change, however important that is, because we have multiple code reds for humanity. And in our research group, as you probably will have heard about already, we draw on the planetary boundaries work originally led by Johan Rockström at Stockholm Resilience Center and developed through a number of important articles, the last one led by Catherine Richardson now in 2023. And what this framework that we position our work within shows is that it isn't just about climate. We have a number of other very urgent challenges. And in spite of all the talk of sustainability, we are increasingly on a very certain path towards a very uncertain future. and of course that there actually are limits. There are nature sets limits, which we all intuitively understand, I think, if we think about it, that there must be some kind of limits to how much we can take out of nature of various kind of resources and dump back into nature, whether it's in the air or the sea or the groundwater, and expect this planet to continue being a relatively safe space for us. So this is a very stark and clear message that we have to take the environmental aspects of sustainability much more seriously than research, business, and policy together have managed to do so far. But we don't see sustainability as just being about mitigating the pressures on the various planetary boundaries, because we also care about people, and leaving no one behind is an established principle of international sustainability efforts. But we are not in a situation where we can say that no one is being left behind, not in Europe and not globally. So what we build on when we talk about sustainability is the conceptualization of a safe and just space for humanity. Kate Raworth took the planetary boundaries framework back in 2012, put the social foundation, the social goals of what was then the consensus towards the adoption of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and placed those within the image of planetary boundaries, and said it's not just about safe, it's also about just, and that is the starting point for how we understand sustainability. It's about securing social foundations for humanity now and for the future, while mitigating pressures on planetary boundaries. So not just about climate change, not just about climate change and human rights, but a whole range of interconnected and complex issues that cannot be simplified to any single metric. Indeed, many of these issues cannot be quantified. It requires a whole range of various methodologies to understand where we are going and what we need to do to contribute to sustainability, to securing, of course, human rights, contributing to the protection of human rights and other basic social rights, and contributing to ensuring that countries have the economic and governance basis for well-functioning societies, while dealing with this range of interconnected and complex environmental issues at the same time. So what is the role of law for sustainability in all of that? Well, law is amongst society's most powerful tools. Law constitutes the rights and duties of the various actors in society. Law conceptualizes various ideas. So when we think about companies, that is something that is conceptualized by law. And law either sets out a meaningful concept of companies or doesn't. Law either sets out properly what companies should do, or allows other regulatory forces to come in and seek to define what companies are about. Law can change norms. It's very well established that law cannot change things alone. So a very, very good law is useless, first of all, of course, if it's not enforced, but also if there are very strong social norms against that law, then there might not be any possibility of law changing the social norms. And often we need support of social norms to get the changes in legal norms. But law can also change quite entrenched social norms. We've seen that previously, at least in some parts of Europe, through the bans against smoking in public places, which has changed social and moral norms for many of us. In the Norwegian context, we've seen that when the government decided to go against all opposition and adopt a rule that said that there had to be at least 40% of both men and women on boards of public companies. That was really seen as unheard back in the days. This is nearly 20 years ago, but it has changed social norms in Norway, and it has contributed to change all over the world. And yet law has limitations. And if I were now to summarize what law has done so far for sustainability, I would say that law has failed us. And this has a number of explanations, and one of them resonates with what Capra and Mattei show in this book, In the Ecology of Law, where they trace the development of legal science with natural science and show how law has remained with such a mechanistic and silo approach. And we have both horizontal and vertical silos. So we have this idea, the horizontal silos, that some issues can only be dealt with on the international level, and that can then be used as an excuse for decades not to do anything in Europe or in a nation state. We have vertical silos, which has reinforced this idea that some areas of law are not supposed to say anything or think anything about environmental and social issues, for example, company law. And law tends to be rigid and backward looking. And again, if we don't question the values that underpin the laws that we have, we risk that law just becomes a path-dependent perpetuation of inequality, because law is never value neutral. It is always the result of conflict. And that is something that we need to take with us and continuously question. And much of the discussion we've had, and this is again building on Capra and Mattei, about whether we need the markets to come in and solve things, do we need the private sector to be involved, or is sustainability a challenge that should be dealt with by the state only? Capra and Mattei show that that is actually not the major discussion, because public or private, which in itself is a misleading dichotomy, is basically two sides of the same coin, which is about property and power and profits, while what we should be talking about is commons and community and collaboration, which is a very different way of thinking than we for decades have been thinking in the areas of law that most of us around this hybrid table work on. And there is also an inverted relationship between the competence of law and the need for regulation when it comes to sustainability. Because we are talking about global issues, but international law is weak, with limited possibilities for enforcement, while national law is strong, with very good possibilities for enforcement, but is often scared to do anything about global issues because of the danger of regulatory competition. That's the starting point, and that informs what we have done after 10 years of a research group named Companies, Markets and Sustainability, to last year explicitly calling our research group Sustainability Law and expressly saying that we aim to contribute to sustainability. So we see sustainability law as an area of law that aims to identify, analyze, and propose normative solutions to the grand challenges of our time. And then what is the role of research for sustainability? How can this be helpful in any way for PhD candidates and other scholars for that matter? Well, I will divide this into three areas. It's about theory development, it's about analysis, and it's about transdisciplinary work. Theory development is about going to the core of the dominant values, ideas, conceptualization that inform the area we are working on. And if we don't do that to some extent or other, or at least can build on others that have done that, then we risk just perpetuating values that others have brought in. And as Jukka and I have been doing in work, including in the paper on interdisciplinarizing legal theory, that is one of the readings for the seminar and specifically for my presentation, we have gone in and questioned the dominant theories, or sometimes not even theories, sometimes they're just postulates inspired by theories that inform business law. And in my opinion, one should always at least take some time to think about what is the basis for this area of law that I am working on. And if it's not abundantly clear, then use a little bit of time to investigate it and see, is there a need for a critical analysis here on the very fundaments itself, or is that fine so I can move on to the other level? So critical theoretical work is not something that should just be left to people who only work on critical legal theory, for example. It should be an integrated part in what most of us do in some way or other. And then the core of what we often do with research, in legal research, is analyses of law. And there I would say in research for sustainability, that a starting point can be to ask, what are actually the objectives of this area of law? What are the objectives of the piece of legislation you are working on? Are they fit for purpose? And especially in Europe, where most of us work to a small or larger extent on EU law, whether even if we are doing research on national law, then EU law will be a part of the framework for what we are doing. And that brings with it exactly that kind of analytical method, because EU law is teleological, it is objective oriented, it is dynamic and contextual. EU law can change in light of the objectives of law. And any area of EU law is meant also to contribute to the overarching areas of or objectives of EU law. So asking yourself what the objectives are can be a good starting point to frame the research in the area. And even if you're far into the research, to check what you are doing and whether that contributes to answering the fundamental questions of your area. And again, this has to be an interdisciplinary research to some extent, even if you think you are doing quite an ordinary dogmatic, as we like to call it in law, PhD thesis, because if you're interested in sustainability or other societal issues, then there will be some kind of interdisciplinarity in your empirical basis. There has to be some kind of understanding of what the context that you're working within is based on. As Jukka wrote into our paper on interdisciplinarizing legal theory, showing the historical development of theory in our area, that there have been different seasons for integrating law and various other disciplines, but there can never be a season for law shorn of other disciplines. That doesn't mean that every PhD thesis should be a full-blown, deep interdisciplinary analysis, but it also means that there is a risk by thinking that it's possible to do research in law only within law, because law always is meant to be a part of society and contribute to something or other in society. I mean, if not, why do we even have law? And then the third issue that I want to, the third area where research for sustainability is relevant that I wanted to talk about is transdisciplinary work. And when I talk about transdisciplinary work, I mean where there is some kind of collaboration between scholars, between academics and practitioners. Because publishing academic articles can be inspiring to civil society, to policymakers and business. So I'm not in any way saying that that isn't important. And I mean, it's the groundwork of what we do. But what we have seen, those of us who have been in academia for a while and have our PhD thesis some years behind us, is that if we want to contribute as a research group to change, we cannot only hope that the right policymakers or the right decision makers in business or the right NGO will pick up our academic article and say, aha, is that what we need to do? Cool. Now we know how to work forward. Rather, we have tried to and want to increasingly in the future, or at least speaking for myself, I do, to contribute to change also by working together with people in practice, to contribute to change through dialogue and co-production of knowledge. But there, I think it is also very important that we think continuously about our integrity, so that the idea of having a cool transdisciplinary project, for example, with a big business, doesn't become so exciting that we set aside all the ideas that we had about what we wanted to do to start with. I can mention in that context that we had, after the SMART project, the Horizon 2020 funded project, Sustainable Market Actors for Responsible Trade, from the middle of it and towards the end, we had 2 years of negotiations with a very large multinational enterprise where there was an interest to do transdisciplinary work, but it failed at the end. And there can be several reasons for that from their perspective as well. But I have a feeling that we were very clear on how we wanted to do the transdisciplinary research based on actual sustainability, that contribute to that failing. But we have been involved in other transdisciplinary work together with Hanna Alström, who you heard from earlier this week. I had a very exciting project with a Norwegian regional bank where we worked together to find out how they could integrate our research-based concept of sustainability, not that it's ours as if we have developed it, but the one that we are using, how they could integrate that into development of strategies for the bank. That was very fulfilling. We've also undertaken a transdisciplinary project at the university itself, funded by the university, where the university wished to change its public procurement of catering. Now, you will have had some hands-on experience that I haven't had yet of how that worked, because you have had food and beverages brought to you through that public procurement project. So probably you will be able to tell me, as I've already heard a little bit from Eleanor and Jukka, that it's not quite as sustainable as we would want it yet. But that it is also a part of that project which we've integrated into the agreement with the companies that are delivering food to the University of Oslo, that we will have a continuous improvement process, which is also a very exciting and innovative way of working with companies. So this is something that I want to do more in the future as well, depending on success with funding proposals, as is often the case. So theory development, the hard core of what we do, the analysis of law, and transdisciplinary work, from interdisciplinary to transdisciplinarity, it's all about contributing to sustainability. And we are in a time now in Europe where the EU is very, very clear that it wants to contribute to sustainability. So that gives us a very, very good framework for what we are doing. Not so many years ago, there was very, very little sign of that. And then the work was more, for example, in my doctoral thesis, it was about showing that the EU actually has sustainability as a part of its overarching objectives as a matter of treaty law, but there was very little sign of it in practice. Now we see a lot of signs of it, but the question is, and what all of us, I think, around this hybrid table in various ways will work to question, is whether it is enough, and if not, what can be done. So we see sustainability on the EU agenda for when it comes to business, finance, circular economy, public procurement, all of the areas that we are interested in our research group. And we can see when it comes to business, for example, that in practice, we have business as usual with exploitation of people, destruction of the environment, and undermining of the economic and governance basis for well-functioning societies. There are drivers for change, but they are not strong enough. That is a part of the factual basis for any research when it comes to business and sustainability. Finance as well, there is an unprecedented interest on sustainable finance in the EU with the Sustainable Finance Initiative and regulation coming at an unprecedented speed. But finance, as usual, is still, in spite of all the talk and in spite of all the greening of funds and all of that, it's still very much contributing to the extreme unsustainabilities of our time. So there are drivers for change, and we can contribute to reinforcing those, but they are not strong enough on them by themselves. And then the circular economy, we know, and the EU knows, that we need to shift from a linear economic model to a sustainable circular economy. But as you've probably already discussed this week, what the EU is doing when it comes to the circular economy is more about ensuring that we are very efficient in our overuse of resources, in our overproduction and overconsumption. So also here, critical theoretical research, interdisciplinary analytical work, and also transdisciplinary initiatives are needed. And I know that all of you can contribute to change. You might not feel that your project is big enough or important enough, but it's all about getting this huge jigsaw puzzle of sustainability into place, and we all have contributions to make there. Thank you very much.